Hello everyone, I'm Coretta Wilson and welcome to Insight with Superintendent Clayton Wilcox. It is a new season of the program that goes beyond the sound bites of local news and gives you a larger view of the issues and initiatives happening in Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. And a new season brings new leadership to our school district. Dr. Clayton Wilcox has been sworn in as the new superintendent. In times of transition, there are bound to be plenty of questions, and our job is simple: get you the answers and provide insight from the superintendent himself, Dr. Clayton Wilcox. Welcome to Charlotte and welcome to the show. We are so glad to have you here.
Thank you very much. I'm just honored to be here. Charlotte has become a home to me, so I'm excited to be here.
And it will be home for a while. Share with our viewers your leadership journey on becoming a superintendent.
Well, you know, I think it begins early on in my life when my family, my grandparents began to say, you know, Clady, there's nothing more honorable than being a teacher, because many of my uncles were teachers in the Midwest. My grandfather thought there was probably no higher calling than being a teacher. That led me to actually becoming a teacher. For a while I thought I was going to go to law school, okay. But then I realized when I reflect back on the best times of my life, it was times that I spent in school. And I had a lot of great mentors who nurtured me and pulled me through some real rough patches. And so it only seemed right. I went to the University of Northern Iowa then, became a teacher. Again, I kind of hearkened back to those great teachers who kind of put me in a position. And I taught a year of third grade in Illinois. Yeah. I taught a year of sixth grade, and then I moved back to my hometown where I taught a combination third, fourth grade classroom, which was probably one of the greatest experiences that I ever had. And then I was moved to a middle school where I taught science for 13 years. It was only after that that I entered into administration. Of course, along the way, I'd been a basketball coach, a union president, a number of other jobs within the system. But ultimately, I became an assistant principal and a principal. And then I moved to St. Augustine, Florida, where I was a human resources director, and beyond. So we can talk more about that.
You've got a wide variety in your resume, so you really got your feet wet in the classroom.
Absolutely. I think that's really where education happens, right? It's with our classroom teachers,
the magic.
That's exactly right. And I think, you know, some people kind of tease me and say, well, you look younger. And I say, that's because I was a classroom teacher. And, you know, other teachers say, well, no, that ages you. But no, I think it doesn't, because you get in tune with young people. You start to listen to them. I think, you know, it adds a vitality to your life that's, you know, stays with you.
Mm-hmm. You hear that laughter of those children.
Absolutely.
You've been a superintendent in other places, other districts. How do they compare to the size of CMS, which most people say is very large?
Well, you know, part of the leadership journey is every step you're at, it kind of prepares you for the next step. So right. I mentioned that I was in a district in Florida, St. Augustine, Florida. St. Augustine was a school district of about 25,000. Okay. I moved there to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which was a school district of 52,000. It was actually, I think, the 70th largest school district in the country at that time. I went from there to St. Petersburg, the Tampa-St. Pete area, Pinellas County, and there we were 115,000 students. So that scale was there at that time. I then went to New York City, worked for Scholastic, where we had, you know, a national presence. We were in almost every school district in the country through our traditional media. We also, through the education company, were in hundreds of school districts across the country. So size and scale have always been important to me, and I think it's kind of made me a better person in terms of my ability to cope with the kinds of challenges that we'll face here in Charlotte.
Definitely we'll face here in Charlotte. Charlotte, of course, is extremely diverse. How do those other districts and experiences compare to the diversity you see here in Charlotte? How will it help you, perhaps?
Well, I think they've prepared me uniquely, because every step of the way we've had a group of young people who came from either disadvantaged backgrounds or came from a minority background, or, you know, when I was in Baton Rouge, we were a majority minority school district. So 70% of my kids were African American or black kids. So I think they all prepared me well. But also culturally, I'm a Mexican American. You know, my grandparents came to this country. You know, some might argue, well, they came here illegally. Yes, they did, but they came and made great lives for themselves. They've contributed, and here I am, the first generation of a family of immigrants.
Why do you think the CMS board selected you? So many choices out there. Why did they choose you? Do you think that diversity that you bring or that you have experienced was a part of that?
Well, I'd like to think that, and I think that they kind of saw that as seasoning, and I think they realized that this district has had a lot of transition over the last 10 years. I believe there been 5 different superintendents in that time frame, and I think they wanted somebody who would commit to being here for the long term. I think they wanted somebody who would bring people with him to kind of ease some of that learning curve of a new community and add a bit of vitality amongst kind of a more of a traditional setting.
And you chose CMS. You said yes. Why CMS? I'm sure you had other offers out there.
Well, I probably could have looked, and
we think it's the best choice, but anyway.
Well, thank you. I left. Washington County had just extended my contract. I could have stayed there and actually earned retirement in Washington County. We had a lot of great things going on there. The recruiters sometimes call and ask you to go places, and I said no to several different recruiters. But ultimately, when the recruiting firm called and said, you know what, CMS might be a great place, I thought, absolutely, I want to apply for this. Because nationally, CMS is thought as a lighthouse district. I mean, I think oftentimes here in CMS, we're so critical of ourselves.
Right.
But around this country, people look at CMS as kind of that lighthouse district where good things are happening for kids. People know that we are a majority minority school district, and yet we outachieve many other school districts, certainly other urban school districts. We're known for innovation. We're known for great teaching. We're known for great leadership. This district has known across this country for a district that pioneers new initiatives that then make their way out across the country.
Dr. Wilcox, you mentioned that CMS has a wonderful national reputation. What have you heard about that?
Well, across the country, people talk about this district being a pioneering district, and in fact, I found that.
Okay.
But locally, I think the thing that I might say is perhaps we've tried so many things now that we're losing a little bit of a sense of who we are as a system.
Okay.
And so one of the things I want to do is maybe pull back a little bit and say, what are the things that we're doing that are really good for kids, as opposed to things that somebody wanted to try. I think it's vitally important for us as a school system to begin to talk about kind of a guaranteed viable curriculum. It's not enough for the kids at your school or another school to do well. All kids have to do well. I hate to think that you're kind of a victim of your zip code in terms of what your diploma means. So we're going to really kind of step back a little bit, try to be more supportive of our teachers in terms of curriculum, the design of that curriculum, the delivery of that curriculum, making sure that teachers have the resources that they need to deliver it.
And that leads us into our next question and topic, student assignment. The student assignment phase 1, which gets ready to start, letting families choose a school that fits their children through magnet programs. What are your thoughts on that, and how do you put those parents at ease who are a little bit upset about some of the changes that are to come?
Well, I think the first thing I would say as a school superintendent, my job is to make sure that every school is a great school. So I am going to begin with trying to build that solid base across the system. And then parents are going to be able to make choices about our magnet programs or our specialized learning communities, not from a position of fear that the school that they're assigned to isn't a good school, but rather, I want this for my son or daughter because it's extra, it's additive to their educational experience. So I think that's where we really begin with this. And I honestly believe when you look at our numbers that people are embracing the choices that we're offering. Now we've got to make sure that those choices that we're offering are delivered with fidelity. So that if we say your child's going to a STEM academy, that real learning is going on there in science, technology, engineering, and math.
What are your thoughts on the magnet schools? Are they good enough? Do we have some improvements and some work to be done?
I think we have a number of really great magnets. When you look at some of our language immersion programs, I think they're terrific. I think there are other places where we have room to improve. And I don't think it's for lack of effort by our teachers. I think our teachers are doing a great job. But I think we've got to make sure that they have the resources, that the kids that they're seeing understand that being there is a privilege and that they have to be engaged.
How important is it for the students and the parents to know that you are desperately trying to make these changes and make sure that the education they want through these magnets are really there? Do you think they understand that?
It's hard for me to put my eyes and kind of my mind in their space. But, I think if we're continue to be open and we continue to talk about areas where there are opportunities to improve, then parents are going to embrace the changes. I think everyone knows that we have work to do. We have achievement gaps in this district, not just between white, black, and Latino kids. We have achievement gaps in terms of how many of our girls are taking advanced honors and math classes. We have other gaps where, perhaps white children are not doing as well as some of our other subgroup. So we have a lot of work to do.
We know that the phase 2, which begins in the 2018-2019 year, brought out a lot of emotions with about 7,500 students being reassigned. How do you put those parents and those children at ease? How do you comfort them through this change?
Well, I think that begins by making sure that from day one, when they show up on that campus, they're welcome to that campus, and the rhetoric around this matches the experience. So if we said that we're going to reassign you to a school and it's going to be X, Y, or Z, then it better be X, Y, or Z. It can't be some variation of that. So, to that end, I've created a team of folks who are going to kind of lead on a project management basis. Okay. Every one of those school changes, we're going to work over this next year to make sure that when people step on those campuses in 18, 19, that it is what we said it is.
Do you understand why people are a little bit nervous about the change?
Oh, absolutely.
Because as a parent, I'm sure you can relate.
Oh, absolutely. I think there are a couple of levels that this plays out on. You buy a home in a neighborhood, you think that your kids are going to go to a school that they can walk to. Mm-hmm. You have siblings, and you want them to go to the same school. I
Right.
get that. I'm not inhumane. I'm not insensitive to that. Mm-hmm. But I also would encourage people to think that, a school system has to not only think of the individual, we've got to think of the greater good. Yeah. And sometimes the greater good doesn't necessarily match up with the individual's needs. Yeah. But that's what makes this job so difficult. I have to look parents in the eyes and say, trust us, and yet we haven't been trustworthy. So we've got to figure that out, and we've got to get better.
Let's talk about diversity with phase 2. Does it go far enough? Should it be pulled back? Social economic diversity as far as phase 2. What are your thoughts on that portion of the phase?
Well, I think the board found an appropriate balance.
Okay.
There was a lot of angst, but there were also a lot of people who said we didn't go far enough. And I'm inclined to think that because there was so much push and pull on both sides of this, that maybe we found that sweet spot. Maybe we went just far enough initially so that we can really work and build models that kind of continue to grow organically, where parents say, hey, it's okay that my kids go to school with that other group of kids because they're all learning and they're all getting along well and they're all doing great things.
Is the bottom line that students are getting a great education no matter which school they attend?
I think that has to be the bottom line. And I think, to parents, if they'll give us the chance, what they'll see is we're creating environments that look like the work environments that their kids are going to graduate to. I mean, you can only shelter your children for so long.
Right.
At some point, you're going to have to work with people that are different than you. You're going to have to work with people that you don't fundamentally agree with. I think, early on, we certainly don't want to force that issue too quickly on children.
Because it is an adjustment.
It is an adjustment, and it's got to be gradual. But at the same time, that incremental change, I think, will make your kids better prepared to live in the 21st century.
Let's talk about the graduation rate for CMS. It is on the rise. We're very proud about that. How will you try to continue that trend? And the next part of that question, what does that high school diploma mean to you? What should it mean to our students?
Well, I think the first thing is, absolutely, I'm proud of the work that's been done here. I'm proud of the great work that teachers have done, guidance counselors, social workers, and others who've all kind of come together to wrap their arms around young people and say graduation is important. And I think we're seeing the fruits of that work. But now the real question is, are all diplomas created equally? Does Algebra 1 in one school mean the same as Algebra 1 in another school? Is Algebra 2 or Calculus the same across schools? So does the diploma mean the same thing? And that's why I talked earlier in the first segment about a guaranteed viable curriculum. I think that's the real work of the school district going forward now, is making sure that the diploma does mean something. And for the young people, when they graduate with it, they should know that they can walk into business and industries or university settings and kind of pursue their dream because they're not held back.
That sounds exciting, and we're going to put a comma right there and talk about that
all right.
later on.
I'll stay with you.
When we come back, more of our conversation with the superintendent. Welcome back to Insight. CMS employs over 19,000 people, from teachers and principals to bus drivers and administrators and more. And what should be listed on each and every one of their resumes? Dedication to children. Dr. Wilcox, you've said that this is very important to you, so give us some insight on what you expect from Team CMS.
Well, you know, I've said repeatedly since my selection that I have one constituency, and that's the 147,000 kids that we're privileged to serve. So I expect each employee of Team CMS to care passionately and deeply about kids. And I believe that most do. I really do. I think most people give their all every single day in the service of children. And to those people, I say thank you. There's probably no more honored profession than education. And whether you serve in a classroom, whether you serve as an administrator, whether you're a parapro, whether you're a bus driver, a food service worker, or the guys that make sure that our facilities are clean and neat, the guys that come and take care of plumbing problems and other challenges. You know, this is an honored profession, and I think we have to treat each other with great dignity and respect because there's value in all the work.
I agree. We have a lot of clients out there.
We do, we do.
What would you tell your CMS teachers? You had a message for us, them, at the leadership conference not long ago, and some of that included technology. So I want you to touch on that as well as any other topic you want to bring to us.
Well, first and foremost, you know, I think technology will never replace a great classroom teacher. A great classroom teacher is where we have to invest a lot of our time and energy, making sure that kids have somebody in front of them who cares deeply about them. But I would also say in the 21st century, our teachers have to embrace technology as a force multiplier. They have to view technology as giving them the opportunity to give kids a window on the world. And so where our kids lack context, the technology is going to help them provide that context for kids. You know, I've gone so far as to say, and it's been reported in the paper, that I don't think technology will replace teachers, but I do think great teachers who use technology will replace teachers who don't use technology.
Yeah. And I believe that to be true as well. Let's talk about pay raises for teachers and how much salaries are currently. And are you one of those people who will advocate for additional funds for your teachers?
I'll absolutely advocate. And I've said this multiple times that I believe our teachers deserve more. I believe we have to find a way to demonstrate and be accountable for that pay. But I absolutely think fundamentally teachers need to be honored by increased compensation. So not only will I talk and champion that at a local level, I plan to spend some time in Raleigh talking to our legislators about the need to make sure that we can pay people, value people for the work that they're doing.
Do you think they should be paid as professionals?
Well, I absolutely do. And I think we have to somehow get some of the mindset to change from the fact that, oh, teachers don't work in the summer. That's just such an old, kind of tired and worn out criticism. I don't know a teacher who isn't honing their craft by attending workshops, summer learning. And, you know, actually, you know, oftentimes teachers will take a vacation. And, you know, what's interesting to me is when I watch teachers take vacation, what they're doing is they're collecting knowledge that they're going to bring back to their classroom. Yeah, they're spending a little time away. But, you know,
they're doing it on the beach.
Well, you know what, it's funny. I've watched teachers on the beach, and, you know, you say, what are you doing collecting those seashells? Is that for your bathroom basket? No, because I want to introduce this time to my kids. So, you know, I think teaching, like any other profession, you just don't shut it off because it's summertime. I think we just need to value the profession and say, you know, if you are a classroom teacher, if you are making a difference in the lives of kids, you ought to have a livable wage. You know, you ought not have to work 2 and 3 jobs in order to support your family. You ought not have to, you know, make choices about, am I going to buy this or am I going to buy that for my family? So I think we have to work on that.
What about your support staff? The support staff that's part of Team CMS, I'm sure they want to hear from you. Any message for them at this time as they get ready for the new year?
Well, I think the same is true. I think we have to add dignity and value to the work that all of those folks do. And the value means that we have to look at compensation section. But, you know, the challenge for us in looking at compensation is there are 19,000 folks. Anytime you do anything, you're talking about huge amounts of money. So we may have to get at this, you know, piecemeal. But, you know, my commitment to the community, my commitment to the Team CMS is that we're going to begin to address this. We may not be successful early on, but with 19,000 voices all chanting together and not tearing each other down. You know, the one thing that happens in education oftentimes is, you know, we pit against ourselves in these negotiations for compensation. We've got to get away from that, and we've got to get to the point where we support each other in kind of elevating the profession and those who support the professionals.
I want to talk about your executive staff, and we have to address the elephants in the room. because in the papers and in the news lately, and we have to bring it to Inside as well, as you assemble your executive staff, you're bringing in people that you worked with previously, and they appear to our viewers and devil's advocate to have a very nice salary or increase. Want to give you the opportunity to be transparent and share why you brought these people in, what they will bring to Team CMS, and talk about their salaries and why they deserve them.
All right. Well, I think, thank you for asking. First and foremost, you know, when I was being interviewed to become the superintendent, one of the questions that was asked of me is, you know, Dr. Wilcox, if you consider yourself a leader, do you have people who will follow you? And I said, well, you know, I believe so, but that's really a difficult question, because to bring people, two things have to happen. You have to know their work experience and the value that they bring, but they have to then commit to selling their houses, uplifting their children. If they have a spouse, they have to agree that, you know what, the spouse's position comes as well. So it's not an easy thing to ask people to do, but ultimately, I asked some people to come with me based on that request of the board. And I want to be also clear that the board said that, you know, one of the ways that they would evaluate me in terms of my leadership ability is, would I really have people? They went so far as to mention past superintendents who didn't bring people, and that should have been an early warning sign that their leadership skills might have been in question. That said, you know, I didn't put a lot of stock in that for me personally, but I thought, you know what, if they're open to me bringing people, I know some people that will help this community. So I asked my chief of staff in Washington County, she was my human resource officer, to come. Laura had over 20 years in the private sector. She had 5 years with me. I knew her as a known change agent, but also as somebody who was smart, talented, and reasonable in her approach to problems. And quite frankly, she is probably the best problem solver that I know. I also was attending board meetings during that time frame, and so one of the things that I looked at was the call to fix some of our food service issues. Not that we don't have a dedicated food service team, but we were not able to be responsive to food allergies in the way that community members would like. We maybe didn't have some of the relationships with the local growers for bringing farm to table to our kids.
If I can ask you, the devil's advocate would say, didn't we have someone, a nutritionist or someone who was already doing that? And perhaps our viewers would be surprised, like, we didn't have anyone looking out for my kids' allergies and bringing in fresh produce.
No,
some people may say they're surprised at that. So I just
I don't think that, I don't think that they should be surprised, because we did have people that do some of that, but we really weren't addressing it in a way that I thought maybe rose to the level of concern that I was hearing in the community. We absolutely have a wonderful food service team. We have dietitians, we have menu prep people, we have wonderful cafeteria managers. But all that said, you know, we're feeding over 100,000 kids every day. I mean, you know, we have 147,000 kids. Now, granted, some people bring sack lunches, but we are feeding a lot of people. And we're feeding them not just lunch, but we're feeding breakfast. And in many cases, we're sending food home over the weekend for young people. So I thought that we really needed to elevate this position. Once I made that decision, we established a position in terms of, we're going to go forward and do something. But then I kind of looked around and I said, well, listen, I know somebody who's done this, somebody who has been very entrepreneurial in his approach, and hey, he happens to be married to Laura. That's going to work perfectly for us. So I asked Jody Francisco if he would consider coming as well.
And what position, if you say?
And he came as a manager of culinary services, but he is in our Office of Community Engagement, because quite frankly, he's going to do a lot with our community-based gardening. He's going to do a lot with helping kids to understand where their food comes from. He'll be in classrooms with young people talking about that kind of stuff. He will have a liaison position to food services. He'll help to negotiate those farm-to-table contracts, helping us to secure fresh produce. I think that the fact that he would have been paid with federal program dollars would have limited his ability to do some of the things I'm going to ask him to do. All that said, the real question is, you know, why didn't you advertise that position?
Right, because that did come up.
And it did come up. And I said, you know, I had a decision as a leader to make. Did I want to advertise a position, ask people to apply for something where I already knew who I was going to hire based on their skill, their experience? If you examine Jody's resume, you're going to see that very few people could come, particularly at the salary we're going to pay him. We're going to pay him at a director level, which isn't huge money. It is more than a lot of people make. I understand that. But at the same time, I think the value that he brings across the system is powerful. Now, back to the other question. I know the segment's going to probably run long on you. I'm paying Laura $175,000 as a chief of staff, which is more than the person made prior to that. I did that because I thought that, number one, that's what it was going to take to bring her, but I only did that after looking at other chiefs of staff in other large urban districts. And we didn't bring her in at the top, but we didn't bring her at the bottom. We brought her in kind of a mid-range, maybe an upper mid-range salary, because I wanted to establish not only a smart, talented person there, but continuity. I didn't want her to be here for a year and then leave. I wanted her to come with a salary that would make her invest in Charlotte-Mecklenburg and, quite frankly, bring that level of continuity that the board said was missing with this kind of revolving door of superintendents and leadership teams.
Accountability, these people are right under you.
Absolutely.
They will be responding directly to you. Is that
directly
correct?
to me.
Okay. We will pause right there. More insight after this break. And welcome back to Insight. This is the first episode of a brand new season for our show, and the first episode with our brand new superintendent, Dr. Clayton Wilcox. But we don't want to be the only ones asking the questions. So we took our cameras into the community to let you ask questions of the new superintendent. Dr. Wilcox, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Here we go.
Hi, Dr. Wilcox. My name is Colleen Grossi. I'm a math teacher at Garinger High School. I've been here for 4 years, and I'm going on my 5th, and I absolutely love it. How do you think you will encourage or incentivize experienced teachers to come to quote-unquote hard-to-staff schools?
Well, I think Colleen poses a great question. How do we staff hard-to-staff schools? Well, I think you begin by addressing what makes it hard to staff. I think as a system, we've got to come to grips that there are some environments that are tougher to teach in.
Right.
So let's ask why. You know, is it the kids aren't engaged? Is it the kids aren't coming from a community that fully supports us? Is it a facility issue? Is the facility dark and dingy and doesn't feel welcoming and inviting? You know, so I think we're going to have to really deal with the cause. Oftentimes we deal with the symptoms of things when we simply say, you know what, it's a tough environment, so let's pay people more to go into a tough environment. I think you got to look at the environment, right? I mean, you're a classroom teacher. You know that if we don't address the root cause, we're just going to keep putting Band-Aids on. Band-Aids are going to get pulled off. We're going to churn through teachers. So, you know, I think that, you know, schools begin with great cultures. And quite honestly, I've said to our principals, their primary first work is creating a great culture. Culture allows strategy. It doesn't work the other way around. Strategy doesn't create culture. So I think we've got a lot of work to do there, and I think we've got to be honest about some of our challenging environments.
Well, the community speaks, and Dr. Clayton Wilcox responds. One last question before we let you go this time around. What is it that you enjoy? What makes you smile? What will we see you doing in the community of Charlotte?
Well, I like kids. So you're going to see me at athletic competitions. You're going to see me at plays. You're going to see me at different churches around this community where our kids go. Perhaps not often enough, but you're going to see me in those churches. You're going to see me at those athletic events. That's what I'm passionate about, seeing kids be successful, seeing the teachers who are kind of basking in the glory of the kids that are doing great things.
All right. We will look for you in the community at the football games, the basketball games, and perhaps on the field.
Maybe, maybe.
A very heartfelt welcome to you, and we thank you for your service and all of the work to come.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Insight. We hope you learned something that will help you become an informed parent, an energized employee, or an engaged community member. Your support is important to the success of CMS. We'll see you soon.
And I will faithfully discharge the duties of my office
as Superintendent of Schools for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education.
as Superintendent for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, sir.